Action Comics 1047, Philip K. Johnson writing with Riccardo Federici back on art, which I was surprised to see him because, like, wait, for the first issue of the next arc? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad he's here because his art lends like a weight to the story that you miss in more traditional comic art. Like, see, when I went to the backup, the whiplash I got going to this really simple cartoony art style, and that's not a knock on the artist or anything. It's
still good art, but compared, it's comparing Norman Rockwell to to a cartoonist. They're both equally good, but they're so different that you do get whiplash.
Yeah, it's like watching, like a David Lynch movie and then immediately sticking on like an MCU movie. Like, you go from this really artfully unique thing, and then you're like, oh, now it's like just bright colors and typical stuff.
Yeah, and I was so used to Federici doing like this dark, like fantastical stuff. So to see him draw a robot and then just kind of like typical, Superman being human scenes, it's such a nice counter to everything that we just saw in Warworld. That it really sets this arc up differently.
Yeah, and obviously the Warworld stuff is a big effect on this because a lot of it just stems from the fallout of that. Yep. But I think this issue is a knockout of the park. I loved this issue, and I think I'm so excited about seeing more of this. And I'm curious to see how this balances, because obviously this is crossing back and forth between this and Superman for a couple of months. Obviously that means Federici's not going to be doing the art and all of it, because there's just no way. But we'll see. We'll see how it shapes up. I still wonder if we're going to get like maybe more of a focus on John and his issues, and it'll still feel kind of separate, even though they're technically part of one big story. So the opening of the issue is, a woman going to Stryker's Island to visit someone, and we see this robot. And Metallo was probably my guess, but it wasn't really confirmed until later on in the issue who it was.
The fact that she called him Johnny, and I started running through my mind, I'm like,
so
John Corbin, it's got to be Metallo. But it's not like there's any like talk that it's Metallo. She's just talking to her brother.
And this is so cool because he's only got one working arm. He's just sitting there. It's kind of sad. He's hooked up to a laptop where he can sort of put text up on to talk to people, and that's all he's really got. But the way, like, I think Metallo was a far more interesting character after this issue than he was before it for me. At least I don't remember such a great Metallo story where I got this sense of sadness and sympathy because his sister does really care for him, and he just kind of feels sad, and it does feel like this tragedy that he's like this, even though he obviously did some bad things. And that's and I'll get to why a bit more so for the ending, but like
Lex runs it down all the bad things he's done. You're like, oh yeah, there's a reason he's in Strikers.
But it's really sad and somber, and I think
it's when she talks about being on the bus when they're kids, and him talking about the double sun when the moon's out, when it's a really clear day, and you can still see the moon in the sky, and she's just talking to him like he's a human, right? And she's talking to her brother, not to this machine. And it reminded me that Metallo still started life as a human, right? He's not Brainiac. He's not any of these other Superman villains that are. It's possible to
sympathize with who he is, and I think that comes up a lot in the ending. So we'll get to that in a bit. But we see this quick page of what looks like Warworld appearing in the sky, and then we skip ahead a week later. The backup actually goes into more detail about the actual sort of moment it comes, but Superman saves there's like an alien spaceship or whatever it is going down the road, trashing a bunch of cars, and it's just a great scene of Superman like saving a bunch of people, in particular a family who the car goes off the bridge and he grabs it. I will say there's a great panel here of him like holding up the car and flying up. It looks beautiful. The only slight nitpick I have with it, because it is otherwise gorgeous, is the way the trunks are drawn in this panel. They look like a thong. Because they're like, I don't know, for some reason they're skinnier and they just look like...
You're saying Clark needs to adjust his undies.
Yes.
Yeah.
But other than that, it looks beautiful. And the way he talks to the kids after the land about because the kid offers his little flash stuffed dog.
His flash dog, and Superman's like, no, you know what? He can stay with you. He'll help keep you safe. And it's those little moments is why I love when Johnson writes Superman, because he gets it right. Like, it's just this little interaction between kids after he's saved them from certain doom, and then Superman just plays it off like, yep. no, here, this is for you guys.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, I think what Frederici's art does now that we're back on Earth is that it makes a lot of these moments when we're not doing Superman action, we're just doing drama with characters talking to each other. It makes it feel a lot more grounded. It makes it feel more like I'm reading a prestige book, because we get this scene at the UN where they've invited Superman and he brings John and Kara and the Steels to come and talk, and basically Earth is a little concerned that this war world's just hanging out above in orbit, and like, this is a bunch of criminals, this is a bunch of these war zones, like, can we trust them? And Superman has to make this speech about how we have to be welcoming, and he wants the same courtesy for them that he got, and that they won't be here for too long, but some of them have shown an interest in wanting to make Earth their home, and they should be given that. And we get like panels of like different people around the world watching this speech, eventually leading to Lex watching it, which obviously leads us into like the other path of the episode, or the issue, I should say.
Is this the first time we've had Johnson writing Lex? Because it's the first time I can remember.
Do you know, I hadn't thought about it, but you may be right. Yeah. This might be the first time he's written.
Because his Lex is spot on. Yeah. Just the pettiness in the voice and the way that he sees this, and then immediately sends his presence into like into one of his robotic suits, but it's just a drone, for him to go check out Warworld on his own. And they're just like, man, this is very much a Lex thing. I'm glad we have Evil Lex back.
Oh, sure, yeah. I love the whole TV speech, though. Obviously, it's a good speech the way he talks, but the most funny is that the cutting around the people around the world watching in different places. It's only a couple of panels, but it reminded me, of all things, it reminded me of the opening of WrestleMania 17, in which they showed like all these families watching WrestleMania in like different places. But it was really stupid because you could only get it via pay-per-view at the time, and it was people watching like little portable TVs in the desert. And I'm like, how's that getting pay-per-view? There's no way that's got pay-per-view.
Wait. WrestleMania 17 or WrestleMania X7?
I'm calling it 17. Piss off. I'm not calling it X7. I'm not doing it. But that's what made me think of. Except this is actually more suitable for the content, because he's making a speech about, like WWF like to think that they're this important, but this is actually, in context of the universe, this is a very important speech that it should be inspiring everyone.
Right. Well, and it gave me vibes of the Donner movies too.
Oh, sure.
Right. Like, you have that classic feeling of the world tuning in to listen to Superman because he's Superman, and with his speech, and then, I just feel like over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of the mistrust of Superman stuff, and I'm glad that Johnson's not going into that, because even Bendis kind of treaded there a little bit with him giving up his identity, right? And here it's just like, no, Superman's making a speech, and no one but Lex is really questioning him, right? And it's like, well,
But even Lex is like, because I think it's I assume it's what, Mercy or whatever comes in. Not Mercy. What's his usual? Is it Mercy? That's okay. Mercy. I'm second guessing myself. Right? There's too many comic book characters, right? Some of these smaller ones, like I get second guessed myself. But yeah, so she comes in and says, "Is this going to affect Project Blackout?" And he's like, "I don't know yet." So it's not even so much that because obviously back in the early days he questioned Superman because he thought, oh, maybe he's not actually good for the world. Now it's more like he knows that's not true. He knows Superman is good for the world. It's just, does he benefit my interest? Is he going to get in the way of what I've got planned? That's the current problem now.
That's capitalist Lex in a nutshell.
Oh yeah.
What's he going to do to impact my bottom line?
So obviously Lex is going to try and flip this around and hopefully convince the world that this is a bad idea. So he sends up one of his suits and sort of like remote controls it, and we get a sort of representation that he's sort of digitally in the suit, so he's still sort of looking around from it. But he goes to Warworld and looks at the war zones and looks down on them, thinks it's a pit, says the Earth would be this way now if it wasn't for him. That's the ego coming in.
That's the line that was like, yep, Johnson gets it. Johnson writes Lex very well.
Yeah, he says he's got a mutual friend that's been keeping tabs on Superman for him. Do we have an idea for that?
No, it's gotta be either someone that was on Superman's team.
Yeah.
Right? So like Apollo Midnighter, Manchester Black, someone like that, or it's a previously unknown character.
Interesting. But he goes to up one of the dead creatures and says, "Oh, like someone could do great things with this. So my suspicion is that he wants to like use like one of these monsters as a puppet to make the Earth believe that Warworld's a threat and that everyone on it's dangerous. To again, that idea for the battle of like public opinion, which is my favorite thing about Lex versus Superman. It's this thing that's in Birthright is that he tries to convince everyone that Superman's this alien terrorist, and it's all about Superman either intentionally or otherwise proving that that's not the case, that he's there to help and that he's a good person, and so on.
Yeah.
So
and it lines up with the Superman for All Seasons of 2. Is like everything was going fine until Superman showed up.
Yeah. But in reality, everything was going fine with Superman until Lex tried to interfere and mess things up.
Exactly.
So, and then the next part of the book is Superman with Lois and them having this very beautiful page, might I add, of them flying in the sky. And it's like, I think it's like sunset. And, again, very moody. There's a lot of atmosphere that comes from Federici's art that I think just adds a lot of weight to every scene that's in this book. There's just this kind of tone, and it's the opposite of cartoony. It feels like there's emotion and weight to everything that's in the art on top of the words, as well as So so they have this beautiful thing, but they're talking about the two kids. So Clark's brought back the two Thelosian kids from Warworld. And it's like, hey, they need a place to stay, and at least Lois seems to be happy enough to keep them. And talks about how they kind of missed a lot of John's childhood because he skipped that time. So in a weird way, it's kind of like hitting a sweet spot that she was missing, because every time John would go away, she'd kind of forget sometimes that he'd grown up already.
Yep. Like in her mind, when he's not there, he's still the little kid, and then he shows back up as a teenager, and it's like it makes her feel sad, but not like super sad, just kind of like, oh man, I missed out on my kid's life.
Yeah, there's like a bitter element to it. So
bitterness, bittersweetness.
Bittersweet, yeah. So I don't know if like how long this is going to last, or if they're going to keep these kids around as two adopted children, but I'm not against the idea.
Yeah, no, and I like it. It also plays into Johnson's that whole House of L, where we had the future, right?
It does. It also ties in just in general to like Superman. Obviously, is pro-adoption because he was adopted himself,
right?
So it makes sense that he would have some adopted children.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I liked when Johns and Donna wrote the Last Son arc, and we had Chris Kent show up, and he was adopted because and Clark brings up, he's like, yeah, Mom and Pa took a chance on me. It's only right that I take a chance on this kid. And so I like that. But yeah, it made me think of the House of L and thinking like, man, how many kids did Lois and Clark have? And it's like, well, no, dummy. They clearly half of them are adopted, right? And then I started thinking about the different ones, and you have the one that's like a war zone, and then you have the ones that take John's name and the Kent name and all this other stuff, and it's just all about legacy, not just like bloodline, but just the legacy of Superman. And that I feel this is where that starts, regardless of that future comes to pass or not. It starts with Clark taking these two in Metropolis.
Yeah. Although presumably some of them will be John's kids and Supergirl's kids down the line as well. Right. So you got the whole extended shebang. Final scene of the issue is probably my favorite, which is Lex going to Strikers, goes into Metallo's cell, and I love that Metallo just types "get out, get out, get out" because he doesn't want to work with Lex. He wants to be good, and it does make you feel bad. And I think what's interesting is that even though he's ultimately probably going to agree to do whatever this is, it's going to feel more like Metallo is being manipulated and puppeted by Lex than he's just being evil on his own, which gives that a chance that Superman could get through to him and maybe convince him to do or not do something. But yeah, it ends with Lex saying, "Hey, I've got this tech. Here's an orphan box from a thingy. Join me and fight these aliens again." So that's a great ending. It sells the villainous nature of Lex, that he's manipulating Metallo into this, and it both makes you excited for what's going to happen, but also sympathetic for Metallo. I think this was a great final scene. I was
the one that got me is when Lex is running down the stuff that he's done. It's like, that's why you're here, but I know you're a good soldier, and it's almost like Corbin's past all that. He's like, no, this has not worked out well for me. My brain is in a machine, and I need a kryptonite heart to operate it. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So the get out part and all of that is really what drove that scene home to me. That even he knows, Lex means trouble.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in previous iterations of Metallo, he would have been like, yeah, I want out of here any way necessary. but it's almost like he's like, no, I need to do my time. So I like that a whole lot.
Yeah, I also feel like him listing all those things, assault, armed robbery, kidnapping, terrorism, murder. I feel like that's just more manipulation. It's like, hey, here's all these things and all the reasons why you effectively have to do what I'm going to tell you to, because it's your only hope of ever getting out of here. It's your only hope of ever having any sense of freedom or anything else. Yeah. So it makes Lex be super villainous. It makes Metallo be this sympathetic villain who's being controlled. And he looks great here. So, I think this is a phenomenal main story. I was slightly talking about the backup, but I love the main story.
Yeah.
The backup, obviously, the art can't compare.
No, it's still good. Like I don't mind it, but comparing it to Federici, it's just it's apples to oranges.
It feels a bit more old school. It's a bit simpler, flat colors, all that stuff. Whereas Federici has the shaded, muted colors that everything feels very organic and. This feels more like a Saturday morning cartoon, this last chunk. But it's basically them waking up Thal, if I'm remembering the name right, and Warworld appearing, them all getting ready to fight, thinking it's they're going to war, and then it turns out, no, this is Superman returning with the team. So everything's just okay. And that's basically it. The only thing that it kind of teases for this backup next time is that a couple of Mongols loyalists are showing up on Earth wanting revenge for Superman being in part and taking Mongol down.
Led by Chaytil, who was the guy that was missing limbs. So Warworld strikes back basically, and well, I'm sure we'll see the Super Family put them in their place. Yeah. I mean, it's a fine little story for the backup. To sort of flesh that out a little bit. I will say having the same writer on the backup does make it feel more relevant. Even though it was hard to adjust to the art change for this one. Well, and I like too that it kind of he's playing with time in this. Is that in the main story, this has already kind of happened. Like they've come in because they talk about that the Steels are starting up this new energy initiative in Metropolis using the energy that they've I forget the Genesis, right?
Yeah,
Genesis energy. Yeah, so and here it seems like they're just getting that started.
They're harnessing the power of Phil Collins.
And Peter Gabriel, don't forget him.
Yes.
But yeah, and I like the Thal stuff just because she's almost got this not survivor's guilt, but like she's almost incredulous that this actually happened, that Superman was able to defeat Mongol. Because she was there to Superman brings up that she wore, or was it Superman one of the others, that, she wore his symbol in defiance.
Yeah, it was Superman, because she wakes up and says, you did this, and she's like, no, you did this because you wore that symbol and kept that idea alive.
And I do like that, with that, of course she's not automatically believing, like, she's from this world where she was very badly mistreated. It's going to take a lot more. So her being skeptical of it, I thought was a nice character beat.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I hope it's her that brings Channel in, because I feel like she needs some, not resolution, what's it, closure.
She's a win.
Yeah, she needs the win. And I feel like I feel like this is Kenny letting her take the lead after being sidelined throughout most of the Warworld saga.
Yeah. All right, well, what are you going to give Action Comics 1047?
I'm giving this a 9.
I'm going to agree with you again. It is a 9 out of 10. And most of that's the main story more than the backup. The backup's fine, but the main story's excellent.